I'll Miss You, Big Sister, by Very Original Ponyname. The past hour had honestly been the first time, and Celestia knew how long, that Rainbow Dash had so much fun. She had spent the entire morning laughing and partying away at the Sugar Cube corner with her 5 closest friends. Spike, Applebloom, Sweetie Belle, Pinkie Pie had really outdone herself this time. She seemed particularly intent on making this party something truly special. It was, after all, the last time the 6 bearers of the Elements of Harmony were going to be together for quite some time. Amongst the colorful balloons, streamers, and speckles of confetti decorating the baker's interior, what stood out the most was the large white banner sprawled out over the entire width of the building, with the words, "We'll miss you, Dashie. Come home safe," were written upon in multiple colors matching her prismatic mane and tail. After finally being accepted into her beloved Rainbow Wonderbolts, after months of intense training and levels of physical exertion she had previously not thought of possible of herself, or any pony for that matter, Rainbow Dash was about to be deployed for her very first tour of duty. Rainbow Dash had never fully realized just how lucky she had been until this very moment. Finally becoming a member of Equestria's most elite team of flyers, a goal she had been dreaming of achieving since she was a little filly, had been everything she had hoped for, and it would be more. Rainbow Dash was now amongst the most well-known and popular ponies in the land. Her celebrity status was in no small part due to her unprecedented skill at flying. There had been a Wonderbolt before her who had the ability and passion for flight that Rainbow Dash had, and there likely would never be. The shows she put on with her fellow flyers attracted some of the largest crowds in the entire illustrious career. Now, one major concern the ace Pegasus had when she first received word that she had been selected just as what kind of an effect this would have on her personal life. It was an issue she had definitely taken into account long before she had joined the academy, though now that her dream had become a reality, she had just started to wish she had thought about it a little more often. But, much to her relief, her new job didn't take as much of a toll on her personal life as she had feared it would. She still got to live in Ponyville and spend time with her friends, and even still do some work for the town's weather patrol, though that last one was more of a personal favor to the town rather than something that she was forced to keep doing. The only time she wasn't around was whenever practices were held, which was fairly often, but never lasted more than a few hours, and when they traveled to perform in other cities. Those trips usually lasted a few days at the most, and more often than not, her friends were able to make the trips and cheer her on as she performed. Other than those few commitments she had to make for her new job, life changed very little for the bearer of loyalty, until now. Dash knew what she was getting herself into when she first made her decision to join the ranks of her heroes. She knew that along being a daredevil performers, the Wonderbolts were part of Equestria's Air Force. Should the normal peacefully nation find itself under siege from outside forces, they were amongst those who were called into action to aid in combating whatever threat there may be. Thankfully, Equestria was as peaceful as ever at the time present, though sometimes it almost seemed ridiculous to have a military force for such a pacifistic nation. But with creatures like changelings and dragons, sometimes even the Crivens would be a little ominous, it didn't hurt to have a well-trimmed, capable flyers at the alert. Rainbow Dash was fully aware of this fact, and it did nothing to hinder her will to remain with the team. She had always been watching out for her friends and Ponyville in general, and the Pegasus felt almost pathological need to protect those around her, be they friend or stranger, just because it felt like the right thing to do. Maybe that's why the element of loyalty chose her. Whatever the case, Rainbow Dash was only happy to take this opportunity to do more for her beloved homeland. Was she nervous? There was no denying that. She had been on countless adventures with her friends and had braved many harrowing ordeals, but this was something on an entirely different ilk. She was now a member of the Equestria's military, a soldier. This wasn't at all like her previous endeavors with her friends. The Elements of Harmony would not necessarily serve as the best course of action against the invading army or surprise attack, especially since they were kept locked away in the vault in Canterlot, and in the time it would take to get the 6 bearers to harness them, a lot of bad stuff could happen. That's why Equestria had its military, and that's why they had left the Wonderbolts. They could respond to a threat much faster and more efficiently. When Rainbow Dash announced her leaving to her friends, the reaction was rather bittersweet. On the one hoof, they were happy to see Dash living her dream, and they were proud for her showing such bravery and devotion to her country, but there was also the understandable feeling of sadness and worry that something could happen to her. Dash couldn't hold it against her friends for being worried for her. It was the mark of any good friend to care for that deeply for another. But she had to assure them that everything she did for them, and their families, and Ponyville, and all of Equestria. She was proud to do what she did, and her friends all knew. They made no attempts whatsoever to convince her not to go. In fact, despite the apprehension they all felt deep in their guts, they encouraged her to do what she had to do. Now, on the day she was set out, she stood proudly before her assembled ponies, who had all come to the going away party Pinkie Pie had set up to see her off, and basically enjoyed the last moments together before she would be off for no pony knew how long. They'd all had the time of their life for the past couple of hours, laughing and dancing, and playing Pinkie Pie's crazy party games, having their pictures taken with Dash in their Wonderbolt uniform, and for a little while it seemed every pony was able to forget the rather heart-rending situation and just savored the beautiful experience. Dash glanced around at each and every one of those who had come out to support her, blushing slightly, and with a warm, grateful smile on her face. Her friends stared back with an equally warm smiles and glossy, shimmering eyes.
You guys?
Dash began, doing her best to keep her voice from crackling.
I can't even tell you how much this all means to me. You all being here for me, showing your support, giving me the encouragement I needed to not only push myself to the most extreme I've ever pushed myself to get into the Wonderbolts in the first place, but to also stick with them, even if it means not getting to be with you guys as much as I used to. This is definitely the toughest thing I've done so far. Not just because I'll be putting myself at risk, but because it'll be the longest I'll ever go without seeing you guys. It could honestly be anywhere from a few months to a few years.
The sound of sniffling filled the bakery as the 5 older mares, the 2 young fillies, and even Spike began tearing up. Dash was doing everything in her power to avoid losing it as well, lest she look like a total crybaby in front of the ponies, who were depending on her to do her best to vent the nation.
But before I go,
Dash continued shakily,
I just want to say that break out the pancakes, girls, because here comes the sap. That you all are the best freaking friends a pony could ever ask for, and oh jeez, I gotta say it, I freaking love all of you. I'm gonna miss you guys so darn much.
The group burst out in a mixture of giggles and sobbing, though Dash barely managed to keep her tears at bay. Twilight Sparkle was the first to step forward, and she gave her friend the biggest and strongest hug she could muster, which Dash gratefully returned.
We're so proud and honored to have you as a friend, Rainbow Dash.
Twilight said softly.
Thanks, Twi.
Dash replied.
Take good care of every pony while I'm gone, alright? I know that'll probably be hard without me to heroically save the day all the time, but you know I'll be fine. You're one hey of a pony, Twi, and you even impress me sometimes.
Twilight chuckled a bit.
Coming from you, Dash, that means a lot.
The two broke apart, and Dash was then nearly tackled to the ground by a pink blur of a pony. She grunted as she felt herself being squeezed a little too tightly for comfort.
Things just won't be the same without you gone. I know, Pinks, I know.
Dash grunted as she made whatever attempt she could to hug back.
But I need you to promise me you'll keep on smiling and keep every pony's spirits up while I'm gone. The last thing I want is for Ponyville to get all depressed and junk on my account. You promise you'll stay happy as great and crazy as you always are? I will, Dashy. I will.
Pinkie promised tearfully.
And I'll throw you an even bigger party than this one when you come back. The biggest I've ever thrown. Great, Pinkie.
Dash chuckled.
I'll hold you to that, alright?
Pinkie Pie finally released the Pegasus and gave her a snappy salute, which Rainbow Dash returned. Next up came Fluttershy, who was the only member of the group doing absolutely nothing to keep the dams in her eyes from bursting. She cantered towards Rainbow Dash and embraced her tighter than she had ever embraced any other pony before, which her fellow Pegasus returned with equal strength.
Please be safe, Rainbow Dash.
Fluttershy whispered in her friend's ear.
You're my oldest friend. I can't imagine life without you. Yeah, I'll be fine, Shy.
Dash assured her, gently patting her back.
You gotta be strong for me, okay? And for the girls. You've always been a strong mare, Shy. I've always been proud to have you as a friend.
She paused for a moment and then sighed.
I just hope you know that, because I could have done a better job at showing it. Oh, Rainbow Dash!
Fluttershy whimpered, tightening her hold on her frilly-hood friend.
You're the best friend I've ever had. I've always treasured our friendship with all my heart, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Dash gave a contented sigh as she heard her sincerity in Fluttershy's words.
I wouldn't trade it for anything either, Shy. Thank you for being such an awesome friend.
Fluttershy just sniffled and nodded. As the two released each other, Dash gave her an encouraging smile, which Fluttershy actually managed to return. Next up, Rarity, who wasn't faring much better than Fluttershy, was holding back the tidal wave of emotion. Rainbow Dash hugged the elegant unicorn, who was about as different from her as anyone could possibly get. Yet, that difference never got in the way of a beautiful relationship.
Don't take this the wrong way, Rare.
Dash said.
But I honestly think this may be the closest I've ever felt to you.
To her surprise, Rarity actually laughed through her tears at that and embraced the Pegasus even tighter.
I shall keep you in my thoughts every day, dear,
She whispered.
I appreciate that, Rarity. I really do. Thanks.
Dash said as they released. And now it came time for a goodbye. Rainbow Dash was really dreading. She found herself dangerously close to totally breaking down as Applejack stepped forward. Though she loved and cared deeply for all her friends, Applejack, the pony she felt and related to the most, had a particularly special place in her heart. The two embraced in the tightest and most emotionally charged hug yet.
Take good care of yourself, RD, you hear?
Applejack said.
I know you make us all proud.
Count on it.
Dash replied with quiet confidence.
Take care of your family and watch out for the girls, okay? I'll be back to school and you at horseshoes before you know it.
Applejack chuckled heartily.
Now y'all know I ain't never been beaten at me in a game yet, right?
Yet is the key word there, AJ.
Dash said snarkily.
Ain't gonna happen, Sugar Cube. I'm too good.
And in the end, you still won't be good enough.
The two exchanged taunts for another minute or so before finally separating, and Dash honestly didn't think she could have pictured a more appropriate farewell from her best friend and rifle. Then came Spike, and that being the only male in the room, he was clearly trying to keep his emotions in check, particularly in front of Rarity.
Well, I'll, miss you, Dash.
He said, rubbing the back of his neck. Rainbow Dash chuckled and pulled in the baby dragon into a one-arm hug.
Yeah, I'll miss you too, big guy.
She said.
Take care of that egghead over there, will ya?
She pointed at Twilight.
Make sure she eats her veggies and whatnot. No promises on that.
Spike joked.
You haven't seen how she gets when it comes to alfalfa. Spike.
Twilight scolded in a flat tone. The whole group shared another laugh, and finally Rainbow Dash came up to the two small fillies, Applebloom and Sweetiebelle, and her face fell into a worried frown. She hadn't been able to take her mind off of this for the whole party, and now she had finally had a chance to point out that some pony happened to be missing from the group. Some pony very special to Dash.
Hey, you guys told Scootaloo about the party, right?
Dash asked.
We sure did.
Applebloom replied with a frown.
I could have sworn she said she'd be here. Maybe she forgot and got the time mixed up.
Sweetiebelle suggested.
Scootaloo, forget about a chance to spend time with Rainbow Dash?
Spike said incredulously.
That's like a joke or something.
It don't seem very likely.
Applebloom sighed.
Maybe she'll show up in a little after a while if you're willing to wait a few more minutes.
Rainbow Dash sighed sadly.
As awesome as it sounds, I can't hang around much longer, guys. I gotta be there by this afternoon. It's a pretty long flight.
Applebloom and Sweetiebelle frowned sadly, but nodded in understanding.
Poor Scootaloo's gonna be so upset when she missed you.
Sweetiebelle said.
Yeah, I know.
Dash sighed. She hung her head and stared blankly at the ground for a moment. She lost track of time as her head filled with thoughts of her #1 fan and surrogate sister.
Dash, you alright?
Huh? Yeah.
Dash shook her head and regained her composure. She looked back down at the two fillies before her.
Well, when you see Scootaloo, tell her I said goodbye and that I'm gonna miss her.
Both fillies nodded assuredly, making Dash manage to smile again.
Come here, you guys.
She pulled them both in a tight hug.
Go easy on your sisters while I'm gone, huh? They do a lot for you two.
She leaned in closer and whispered,
But not too easy.
Applebloom and Sweetiebow both giggled and nodded again. As Dash released them, she gave them both a rather stern glare.
Can I expect to see some cutie marks on this lynx when I get back?
She asked. The two fillies puffed out their chests and saluted proudly.
You can count on it.
They said in unison. Dash smiled and saluted back. That was that. Now it was time to head out. Rainbow Dash could only hope she'd made the moment with her friends as meaningful as possible, and with her saddlebags packed with all her necessities and slung comfortably over her back, the Pegasus made for the exit. When she reached it, she turned back and gave one last glance at her assembled friends. They were all watching her proudly, their eyes welling up with tears, and even Spike was unable to control himself any more as he cuddled up to Twilight, who lovingly wrapped a forearm around him.
Goodbye, guys.
Rainbow Dash said quietly, a small tear forming in her eye, which she barely managed to hide from the others. She was proud of herself for being able to keep her emotions in check for most of the part. There was no way she'd be caught crying in front of her friends. She was supposed to be the tough one, after all. Her friends all waved and shouted their individual farewells, and Rainbow Dash gave them all one final wave, and then headed out the door, letting the tear finally fall from her eye. Dash had known in advance about the going away party Pinkie Pie was throwing for her. They had decided making it a surprise wasn't necessary, given the rather bittersweet situation. What she hadn't expected, however, was the large crowd of ponies lining the streets of Ponyville, cheering loudly for her as she came into view. Dash stared in awe at the mass assembly who had come out to see her off. It seemed as though every pony in Ponyville was out there. She recognized almost every face. Most of them were waving a small-sized equestrian flags, while others holding signs and banners saying things like, "Thank you, Rainbow Dash," and "We love you, Dash," and "Come home safe."
By Celestia, this town won't rest until they've turned me into a sap.
Rainbow Dash's cheeks were flushed to bright red, and she could feel the sting of tears once again. While it was true she could have taken flight right then and there, Dash was so moved by the town's show of support for her, she felt at least that she should walk through the town to give every pony a chance to see her before she left. Maybe it was her ego getting the better of her again, but it seemed the right thing to do. As she trotted through the streets, she smiled warmly and gave friendly nods to all of who had gathered to see her off. She mumbled a few thank yous, though she doubted any pony could hear her over the cheers. Dash's heart soared at all the adoration she was being given. Any anxiety or fear she had been feeling earlier that day was beginning to fade away, replaced with pride and bravery, and though her face would be stuck in a permanent smile if she didn't get out of there soon. But as proud and as grateful as she was for all the support, there was one thing that kept Dash from feeling completely content. That was the fact that there was a certain orange Pegasus filly that seemed to be missing from the crowd of ponies. Dash scanned the crowd as much as he could, hoping to maybe see Scootaloo just hidden somewhere down low in the forest of legs of the older ponies. Her smile faltered as the bright smiling face of her little fan was nowhere to be found. Dash sighed sadly, but managed to keep herself from frowning completely at the risk of upsetting all those who had come to see her cheer on.
I'm sorry, kid. I wish I could have gotten to see you one last time.
Dash continued on hoof through the rest of the town, and up until the road led her to a good-sized hill that overlooked the area. She stopped there for a moment, and took some time to gaze down at her town, before she took flight. It couldn't have been a more beautiful day, warm and sunny with little to no clouds whatsoever. The Ponyville weather team was definitely getting along just fine without her, much to her relief. In the town below, citizens were beginning to disperse and return to their usual business. Dash smiled warmly upon the quaint little village. She felt truly lucky to be a part of such a loving and supportive community. Furthermore, it served as a perfect example of why she did what she did. Those wonderful ponies needed heroes to watch out for them, and Dash was always more than willing to be one of those heroes for them. After a few minutes of silent reflection and mental preparation, the brave young Pegasus turned her back to the town and got herself primed for the long flight ahead of her. At top speed, she could be at her destination in less than an hour, but the weight she was carrying would slow her down significantly. She gave her wings one quick flap and prepared to take off.
See you later, Ponyville.
She was just about to go airborne, and then
Rainbow Dash!
Dash stopped flapping and quickly spun around. She recognized that voice anywhere, and she couldn't keep her mouth from grinning. And sure enough, speeding her way up the hill on her little scooter was the young orange Pegasus filly she had been so badly wanting to see.
Rainbow Dash!
Scootaloo cried as she sped closer to her idol, her little wings buzzing furiously as they propelled her forward.
Squirt!
Rainbow Dash called out to the approaching filly, her smile as wide as ever. When she was close enough, Scootaloo leapt off her scooter and did a bit of a roll as she landed. She yanked off her helmet and tossed it aside as she speedily galloped towards the older mare. She came skidding to a stop directly in front of her, panting heavily.
Dang, kid, it's great to see you.
Dash said joyfully as she ruffled the filly's mane.
I was afraid you'd miss me there for a while.
I know.
Scootaloo said between breaths.
I'm really sorry about that.
Hey, don't sweat it, kid. It's no biggie.
Dash said with a wave of her hoof.
You're here now, and that's all that matters.
Dash's smile faded a bit as she gave Scootaloo a confused look.
Apple Bloom and Sweetie told me about the party Pinkie Pie was throwing for me, right?
Scootaloo suddenly looked a little bit uneasy. She nervously pawed at the ground with her forehoof and let her gaze fall.
Yeah, they told me.
She said meekly. Rainbow Dash arched an eyebrow in confusion.
Did something just come up unexpectedly, or did you forget or something?
No, it's not really like that.
Scootaloo murmured.
It's just...
You what?
Dash prodded. Scootaloo sighed and shook her head.
Nothing. Never mind.
Rainbow Dash exhaled sharply and lowered herself to the filly's level. She gently placed a hoof under her chin and lifted it. Scootaloo looked deeply worried about something, and there was no hiding it. Dash put on as kind and loving as an expression she could muster.
Scoots, remember what I told you when I agreed to take you under my wing?
She asked gently.
That you didn't want me falling into any more rivers in the middle of the night?
She answered, sounding a little confused. Dash chuckled heartily and mussed Scootaloo's mane again.
I mean after that, you silly filly.
Scootaloo actually managed to smile at that, though very briefly. After a moment of silence, she slowly answered.
You said you wanted me to trust you with anything, and that I could always come to you with my problems.
That's right.
Dash said resolutely.
I don't want you to ever feel like you have to hide stuff from me. I want you to know you can tell me anything, no matter how embarrassing or difficult to talk about it may be. And I promise not to ever laugh at you or give you a hard time for it. You mean too much to me for me to do something like that to you.
She set herself on her haunches and pulled the little filly in closer to her. She placed the hoof against Scootaloo's back and gently stroked it.
So tell me what's eating you, Squirt. I'll make time for you.
Scootaloo sighed heavily. It took her a few seconds to meet Rainbow Dash's gaze again, but when she did nothing to keep her tears at bay. The little filly leaned in forward and gently nuzzled into Dash's front side.
I don't want you to go, Rainbow Dash,
she whispered. Dash's ears perked up a bit, not sure what she had heard properly.
What was that, kiddo?
She asked with a concern in her tone.
I said I don't want you to go.
Scootaloo snapped suddenly, causing Dash to rear back a bit.
Scoots,
You could stay here if you want, can't you?
Scootaloo asked hopefully.
You don't have to go, right? Please say you don't have to go. I want you to stay here. With me.
Rainbow Dash stared at the filly, her mouth slightly agape.
I'm sorry, Scoots, but I gotta go. I don't have a choice.
She explained calmly.
This is my job now. I get into serious trouble if I don't go. And I'm not just talking about getting fired. There are way, way worse things that can happen to me if I go AWOL.
Scootaloo frowned, and her tear-swollen eyes narrowed.
It's not fair!
She cried.
They shouldn't be forcing you to do something you don't want to do.
Scootaloo, it's not like that.
You don't have to go, Rainbow Dash. I'll help you. You could hide in our clubhouse. Or maybe Applewoman will let you hide in her apple cellar.
Kid, hold up a sec.
And if they come looking for you, we'll tell them you're not here. We'll tell them you went off somewhere far away. And they'll go looking. But we'll never find you. You could stay in Ponyville with us forever and ever. I don't care what I have to do. I won't let them take away my new big sister away from me. I'll...
Scootaloo!
Dash snapped loudly. The little filly yelped and shrank back a bit. She was relieved to see that Rainbow Dash didn't necessarily look angry at her. She was just a bit worn out, was more like it.
Calm down and listen to me for a sec.
She continued in a calm yet stern tone.
I don't want to hide out from them. I don't want to ignore my duty. They're not just forcing me to go. I want to go.
Scootaloo's face fell in horror.
You what?
She gasped, a single tear streaking down her face.
I want to go, Scoots.
Rainbow Dash explained.
I've been living my dream for the past few months. Being a member of the Wonderbolt is something I've wanted nearly all my life. And I have finally made it. And I knew what I was getting into when I first decided to be part of the team. I knew that they were more than just the greatest stunt players in Equestria. I know that they played a huge part in defending the kingdom from threats. And it made me want to join them even more. Equestria is my home. Our home. And they need all the help they can get when it comes to protecting it. That's why I want to do this, kid. They need a pony like me on their side.
Scootaloo stared up at her idol with an expression of pure shock. Rainbow Dash stared back with an expression of confusion and a slight hint of annoyance.
I thought you already knew that, kid.
She said.
When I told every pony I was going into active duty, you seemed really excited and happy for me like everybody else. Why did you wait until just now when I'm about to leave to suddenly tell me you don't want me to go?
She sighed.
Not cool, kid.
Slowly, Scootaloo's face began to scrunch up in anger. It would have been cute to see her pouting like that had the situation not been so serious.
I thought you were supposed to be loyal, Dash.
She snapped as she jerked out of the stunned older mare's grasp.
You always say you'll never leave me, your friends, and Ponyville hanging. Now you're just gonna leave us? Just like that?
Scoots, time out for a sec.
Some element of loyalty you are.
Scootaloo spat.
I had a feeling you becoming a Wonderbolt was gonna end up being a bad thing. I mean, whenever you had to travel somewhere for one of your shows, I spent the whole time just waiting for you to come back because I always end up missing you too much, even if it's only for a couple days.
Scootaloo.
Dash was at a loss for words.
And now you're going away to do something really dangerous. You're abandoning your friends. You're abandoning Ponyville. You're abandoning me.
Scootaloo sniffled and lowered her head.
I thought you were going to be my big sister from now on.
Rainbow Dash bit her lower lip in an effort to keep herself from losing it. Though she never admitted out loud, the sight of that little filly looking so downtrodden and hurt made her heart ache. It was so difficult to explain how Scootaloo had come so close to her over the past couple of years. At first, Dash just saw her as another obsessive fan. She had quite a few of those, particularly in the fall department, and they tended to prove to be more of a nuisance than an encouragement, always pestering her to do tricks for them, take them for rides and sign their wings, something Dash was not even sure was possible. Wings weren't easy to ride on, and essentially just drive her up the wall. But Scootaloo was different. This little filly had gone an extra mile, showing just how much she had admired the boisterous Pegasus, starting a fan club for her, cheering her on as she practiced her move. unlike those other annoying kids, Scootaloo was actually kind of fun to hang out with. Dash couldn't exactly pinpoint the exact moment when she finally started to feel a connection to the kid, but over time she just found herself really coming to like her. From a cloud she was napping on, she often watched her scooting about town on her scooter, pulling off the tricks and taking her friends for rides. The young filly's eagerness to succeed in life and be the best she could never failed to bring a smile to Dash's face. It was one thing for most fans to just sit on their flanks and wish they could be Rainbow Dash, but Scootaloo was the one who really seemed to be trying to be Rainbow Dash. As time went on, they became closer and closer, spending more and more time with each other. It was just recently, during a camping trip, that the spunky young filly approached Rainbow Dash and requested that she'd be taken under her wing and looked after something of a sister figure. And thus, what started off as just another fan and her idol relationship developed into something much more meaningful and profound. If one were to ask Dash a long time ago if she would have ever seen herself getting as close to that kid as she ended up getting, she probably would have laughed that thought off. But now, for reasons she couldn't fully explain, that kid had come to mean the world to her. Perhaps it was the fact that Dash saw a lot of herself in the young filly, the same attitude, the same lust for life, the same urge to be as awesome as she could be. It was like looking at a younger version of herself. And now, the little filly she had become cared for so deeply was suffering severe emotional pain, which Dash felt slightly responsible for. Though Scootaloo had neglected to tell her how she really felt about all this, Dash could tell something was off about her new little sister, yet she never did bother to do anything to confront her about it, and now, right before she was about to leave for what may be a few years at the most, Scootaloo was angry at her. Well, now was her chance to make things right again. It would probably cost her her precious time she needed to get to her destination without being late, something that could easily get her chewed out for, but there was no way Rainbow Dash could leave her little sister like this. It would eat into her the entire time she was gone. The Wonderbolts were just going to have to wait for a moment, and Scootaloo needed her big sister. Besides, getting chewed out was nothing new to Dash.
Kid, come here a sec.
Dash said softly as she reached out to the filly.
No!
Scootaloo snapped as she jerked out of the older mare's hoofs.
I don't want to talk to you.
Dash resisted the urge to snap at Scootaloo and tried again.
Come on, kid. I don't want you feeling this way about me before I leave. I wouldn't feel right.
Scootaloo pouted her lips as she shook her head. She stared down at the ground and sniffled a few times, a few fresh tears falling from her eyes.
Why are you abandoning me?
She whispered.
Kid, I'm not abandoning you.
Dash said calmly.
If I was abandoning you, I'd take off to do whatever I want without telling anybody. I wouldn't even come back or write or anything.
She once again lowered herself to the Scootaloo's level, though the filly still refused to look up at her.
And you know I never do that to you guys. Ever. In a million years. The element of loyalty didn't screw up when it chose me to be its bearer. I'd go to any lengths possible to protect you and my friends. That's the reason I'm leaving for a while. Equestria needs all the help it can get in protecting it from all those threats and bad guys out there, and I wanted to be a part of that. I care too much about this kingdom and all those who live in it to see anything happen to them. I want to do anything I can to protect you all. So, you see, kid, I'm not leaving you, or my friends, or anybody. Or, not forever, at least I'm just...
She sighed. This was more difficult to explain than she thought it would be. Why did the squirt have to wait for now, just to put her on the spot like this?
I feel like I'm never gonna see you again.
Scootaloo whispered, her head still hanging low.
Hey, now.
Dash said.
Don't go around thinking like that. I'd never be able to live with myself if I knew you were all here depressed and whatever on my account.
She attempted to reach out to the filly again. Scootaloo jerked away again, though not quite as forcefully this time.
Scootaloo.
Dash struggled to find the proper thing to say.
I'm not... Nothing's gonna happen to me. I'm gonna be just fine.
Internally, Dash was kicking herself for saying that. After all, there was no telling what would happen to her during her time away, even if Equestria was currently at peace. Anything could happen. And as brave and as talented Dash he knew she was, There was nothing she could do about something like bad luck. All it could take was one little stroke of bad luck, and things could go catastrophically wrong. Lives were always on the line when you were a Wonderbolt.
How can you be so sure?
Scootaloo asked after a while.
Anything could happen. What if it's something you can't handle? What if...
She trailed off there, clearly disrupted by visions of all the horrible things that could befall her hero. Dash had to give Scootaloo credit. She was smarter than she looked, and she clearly wasn't fooled by the whole nothing can go possibly wrong spiel. Even though the filly had the utmost respect and admiration for Rainbow Dash, she knew deep down that she wasn't invincible.
You're right, kiddo.
Dash said with a sigh.
I can't promise that nothing won't go wrong, even though it's very unlikely considering peacetime. The training I went through made me about 20% harder to take down. But, yeah, anything can happen out there.
Scootaloo finally looked back up at her idol, her eyes shiny and wide.
Please don't go, Rainbow Dash.
She whimpered.
Please don't leave me. I need you.
Rainbow Dash sucked in a sharp breath. It was all she could do to keep herself from bursting out with the tears right then and there.
I swear this kid is gonna get diabetes one day.
Dash attempted a brave smile and put a hoof on Scootaloo's shoulder. This time, she didn't try to jerk away.
You really think I'm gonna go down that easily if something goes wrong, kid?
She asked, her smile becoming more of a sly grin.
I thought you knew me better than that, Scoots. There's not a creature in Equestria that could top this Pegasus.
Dash gave the sailing filly a playful cuff across the cheek. Scootaloo's face was crunched up as she tried to suppress a grin. Dash gave her another playful punch, and this time managing to pull off a few giggles from her little sister.
You just gonna take the Scoots?
Dash taunted with a chuckle.
Come on, show me what you got.
Scootaloo knocked away the next punch with a hoof, a determined smile forming across her muzzle. Dash smirked as she unleashed a flurry of fake punches all over the filly's face and gut.
Don't just sit there, Squirt, fight back!
She said playfully. Unable to stifle her laughter any further, Scootaloo gave an animatistic growl and leapt onto the cyan Pegasus, knocking her onto her back. The two laughed joyfully as they fake wrestled each other, throwing out foolish taunts and essentially just lightening the heavy mood. It finally ended when Rainbow Dash got Scootaloo in her headlock and gave her a long, drawn-out noogie, which Scootaloo only managed to get out of by admitting that Rainbow Dash was, in fact, the best pony. Once they settled down, Dash kept Scootaloo pulled close to her. Scootaloo didn't struggle to get away. Instead, she relaxed into the older mare's embrace, nuzzling into her front side. Dash smiled warmly as she tightened her hold, happy she was able to get her little sister to smile again.
You okay now, kiddo?
She asked softly. Scootaloo mumbled.
I guess. It's just, I wish you didn't have to go. I mean, there has to be some other way. Princess Celestia is so powerful. Why can't we just let her deal with the bad guys? And you and the other girls have the elements of harmony. You guys seem almost invincible when you use them. Why can't they just do what you've always done whenever Equestria's in danger, and leave it up to you and your friends?
Dash had to think about that for a moment. It was actually a good point.
Well, that is true, kid. Princess Celestia is very powerful. Probably the most powerful pony in the world, and I don't doubt for a second that she'd be perfectly willing to personally face down any threats to her kingdom and her beloved subjects. But, come on, kid, she's a princess. We can't risk her putting her life in jeopardy. We need her to raise and lower the sun, make laws, and do whatever else this princess do. As for me and the girls, well, it's true, we have kind of become like Equestria's resident superheroes. What with the elements and all, and Twilight, Rarity, Applejack, Pinkie Pie, and Fluttershy are all very brave ponies. The thing is, they're not warriors. Twilight's gotta keep studying magic. Applejack's got her family and Lakers to worry about. Rarity wants to get into fashion design. Pinkie's too wrapped up in baking and throwing parties to have the weight of Equestria placed on her shoulders all the time. But Fluttershy?
Dash chuckled a bit at that thought.
I really think it'd be right to force her ball ponies to go out there and face down threats. I mean, she can be very brave when she wants to be, and that stare of hers definitely comes in handy. But come on, she's too much of a gentle soul to get caught up in stuff like that too often. They're all tough mares, but they can't be expected to fix every mess Western ends up in. Though I imagine they'd all be more than willing to step up should they ever be needed. Equestria still needs its military squirt. We're the first and best line of defense for this kingdom. Everybody needs us. You understand now?
Scootaloo sighed.
I guess that makes sense.
She muttered.
Still,
Remedies loosened her hold on the filly and let her look up to meet her gaze.
What's wrong, Squirt?
She asked in a gentle tone.
I'm...
Scootaloo's eyes began leaking at an incredible rate.
I'm just gonna miss you, Rainbow Dash. I'm gonna miss you so much. Next to Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle, you're the best friend I've ever had.
She sniffled and lowered her head, her swollen, puffy eyes closing.
You're my big sister.
Now, Remedies was in serious danger of losing it. All day long she had put up with that tough facade for all the sakes of her friends, for the sake of all the ponies who had come out to support her, and for the sake of little Scootaloo. But now that facade was starting to show cracks. The brash, bold Remedies' seemingly indestructible ego was being systematically destroyed by the emotional, loving words of a young filly.
Oh, kiddo.
Dash said with a shuddering breath.
You gotta be strong for me while I'm gone. Your friends all need you to be there for them. And my friends are probably gonna need someone to be there for them too.
He thought about that for a moment, and then smiled down at the filly.
Tell you what, Squirt. While I'm gone, I'm gonna need you to be kinda like the replacement me. You know, help my friends out if they need it and be loyal to them. She's the kind of friend I would be. Think you could do that for me, Scoots?
Scootaloo looked back up at Remedies with her glossy violet eyes. A weak smile tugged at her muzzle.
I'll do that for you, Rainbow Dash.
He said with a renewed confidence.
Don't worry, they'll be safe with me.
Dash chuckled and ruffled Scootaloo's mane.
That's a relief. Now I won't have trouble sleeping at night knowing the coolest filly in Equestria is looking after my friends.
Scootaloo's smile became even bigger at hearing that. Dash calling her the coolest filly around has never failed to make her heart soar. Her euphoria lasted only a short while, though, as another question surfaced.
So, how long do you think you'll be gone exactly?
Dash had to ponder that for a moment. She really wasn't sure herself.
I don't really know for sure, Scoots. At the shortest, it might only be about 5 months or so. At the longest...
She paused, realizing that Scootaloo might not like this next part.
4 years? Possibly 5.
Scootaloo gasped in horror, her eyes welling up in further. Dash quickly scrambled to explain further.
But, I mean, that may only be the case if something bad happens, like a war or something. But it's not likely to happen, since, you know, we haven't done anything to get anyone mad at us. We'll be fine. Nothing's gonna...
Dash's words were doing nothing to soothe Scootaloo. The poor filly looked more terrified and worn down than ever. It was at that moment that Remedies had suddenly realized the seriousness of what her previous words truly implied. If worst came to worst, and she did end up having to spend upwards of 5 years on active duty, just how much of things would change while she was gone. She imagined her friends wouldn't change so drastically, at least not in personality. They may have achieved more in their personal goals, Twilight may have been more skilled at magic, and Rarity's fame might have shot up significantly and so on, but they would be more than likely still be the same ponies as before, albeit a few years older. But Scootaloo? A lot of changes would happen to a young filly in the span of 5 years. She'd probably be bigger and more developed. She'd be out of elementary school for sure, probably finish up junior high or just starting high school. Maybe she'll have your cutie mark by then, but maybe she'll have found her cult friend. Maybe she'll have learned to fly. Maybe she'll...
Who knows?
Dash said.
Maybe you'll be over me before too long. Maybe you'll have found another pony to idolize. I mean, there are a lot of awesome ponies out there. No pony quite as awesome as me, of course, but chances are you'll find another...
No!
Scootaloo snapped. She threw herself into the older mare, squeezing her as tightly as her little forelegs could muster.
Nobody will ever replace you, Rainbow Dash. I'll never stop looking up to you. Never.
Dash could feel the warmth of Scootaloo's tears in her front side.
You'll always be my hero, Dash.
She whispered.
You'll always be my big sister.
Rainbow Dash sniffled, and her breath became more shuddery. The dams were going to burst soon, and there was no stopping them. She was grateful they were out of the public's eye for this, because she didn't know if she could live within herself, if the whole town had seen what a sap she was, right then and there. She wrapped her forelegs around the little fan, and held her tight, resting her chin atop the filly's head. She gently shoved her, and stroked her back, and slowly, Scootaloo's sobs began to taper off. So the kid really thought that highly of her, huh? She really held her on that high of a pedestal of greatness. She must have been more serious than Dash had originally thought when she asked to be taken under her wing. For one brief moment, Dash seriously considered saying, "Forget it," and just hiding out in Ponyville with her little sister, spending every spare moment she had with her. The Wonderbolts didn't need her, right? They'd gotten along just fine without her in the past. They didn't need her now. The one who did need her at that time was Scootaloo, and frankly, Scootaloo meant more to her than all the honor and glory of serving in Equestria's military ever could. That thought was quickly dashed, though, as Rainbow remembered the reason for joining them was, in fact, because they did need her. She was the fastest and most skilled flyer they'd ever seen in a long time, something Spitfire herself had told her, and on top of that, she couldn't hide from the Wonderbolts. They knew where she lived, and they'd come looking for her, and the punishment for going AWOL could involve being court-martialed at the worst. She would let down her friends, and all those who could come out to support her that day. She could never do that to them. She had to go. As she continued to comfort Scootaloo, an idea came into her head that might make this whole situation a little easier for the little filly to get through.
Hey, Scootaloo.
Dash said as she gently nudged her back a bit.
There's something I want you to have. Something I've had since I was your age, and so it's been very special to me. But seeing as how I'm a Wonderbolt now, I don't really need it.
Dash opened up her saddlebag and rummaged through it for a moment. Scootaloo watched her intently, wiping her few stray tears from her eyes. Finally, Dash re-emerged from her bag with a small silver object in her mouth. She spat it into her hoof and extended it to the filly. Scootaloo took it between her forehoofs and examined it with wide, excited eyes.
A Wonderbolt's wing pony pin?
She exclaimed.
Yep.
Dash said proudly.
Not a real one, mind you. I got this souvenir when I first saw the Wonderbolts perform. It's only plastic, but I still thought it was pretty cool when I got it. And it's always given me encouragement whenever I doubted myself. It made me believe that I'd have a real one of those someday, if I just kept pushing myself. It really meant a lot to me, kid, but now that I finally made it, I don't really need it anymore. So I want you to have it. You know, so you can think of me whenever you look at it, or something. Jeez, Dash, that wasn't corny at all. So, you like it?
I love it, Rainbow Dash.
Scootaloo cried as she held the plastic badge close to her heart.
I'll take really good care of it, I promise.
She trotted over to her helmet and gently placed it inside.
And I'll look at it every day,
she whispered to herself. Rainbow smiled as Scootaloo trotted back over to her. She was happy to see the number one fan smiling again, even if it was just rather brief. The two sat there in silence for a while, enjoying the beautiful moment for all it was worth. Rainbow took in the sight of Scootaloo and savored it as best as she could. It was unknown if this would be the last time they ever saw the filly as she was right now, so young, so full of vigor, and Dash wanted to have that image engraved into her memory for the entire time away. Scootaloo was just staring back at her with a sheer adoration in her eyes for her idol. It was that look that could melt the heart of King Sombra himself, and was chipping away ever so slightly at the dam, holding back Dash's tears. It wouldn't be long now. After about 5 minutes, Dash took in a deep breath and spoke in a soft tone.
I have to go now, Scoots. You understand why I'm doing this now, right? You know, it's all for the good of Equestria. My friends, my family. You?
Scootaloo nodded.
I understand now, and I'm sorry I yelled at you and made it seem like you were being disloyal.
Dash smiled and shook her head.
Yeah, don't sweat it, kiddo. I know you were just sad. I promised my friends I'd write them often, but I'll make sure to write another series of letters just for you, and you alone. That sound cool?
That sounds awesome, Dash.
Scootaloo said as she began tearing up again. Rainbow Dash leaned in closer to her little sister.
Just remember what I told you. Take good care of my friends and your friends. Look out for them as well as I would, and just keep striving to be the best pony you can be. I definitely expect you to work on your flying while I'm gone.
I will, Rainbow Dash, I will.
Scootaloo whimpered softly. She hung her head, closed her eyes again.
I hope I can make you proud one day.
Scootaloo.
Dash said softly as she gently lifted the filly's head with a hoof under her chin. Scootaloo opened her eyes to see that her idol, her big sister, and the most beloved pony in all of Equestria, had tears streaking down her cheeks.
You already make me proud. You always have, and you always will.
Scootaloo's lips quivered, and in one quick move she sprung onto her big sister, wrapping her forelegs tightly around her and burying her face in the crook of her neck. Rainbow Dash hooked back with equal strength, and the two just held each other for a while, totally oblivious to the world around them, not even bothering to hold back their powerful sobs.
I love you, Rainbow Dash.
Scootaloo whispered right in Dash's ear.
I love you too, Scootaloo.
Dash replied.
I love you too.
Finally, Scootaloo loosened her grip, and Dash shut her back down. Before pulling away completely, Dash took Scootaloo's head between her hooves and gave her a long, gentle kiss on the forehead. By this point, she really didn't care if the other ponies saw how sappy she was being. She really didn't care if they all knew she loved her little Scootaloo. And at that moment, as far as she was concerned, there was nothing more than awesome than that. Rainbow Dash took a step back and gave a couple of flaps of her wings, which was enough to get her airborne. She looked down at Scootaloo, and with a confident smile, tears now successfully wiped away, she looked as though she had never been crying in the first place. Scootaloo looked back up at her with an equally confident grin. She was ready to take on duties as a replacement Rainbow Dash, ready to continue making her idol and big sister proud.
Goodbye, big sister.
Scootaloo said quietly.
Stay awesome, little sister.
Rainbow Dash replied warmly. And with that, the sky blue mare was off to her destination. Scootaloo watched her go, never ceasing to be amazed at what a skilled flyer she was. One day, she'd be up there with her. One day, she'd be a Wonderbolt too. And one day, she'd be ready to protect Equestria and all her friends from whatever threats may come out there. Just like her big sister, who she would be forever proud of. The end.